Hello, my name is Barbara Field, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in Sacramento, California. And welcome to my channel, The Journey of Grief, Becoming Us Without Them. And I started this channel so we could talk about all kinds of grief, so people who are grieving various losses find a place where they hear people who share their experience and feel like it's okay to be grieving the way you're grieving, the thing you're grieving, exactly the way you're grieving it. And today I've asked Lisa Charlebois to be with us. She is a licensed clinical social worker who specializes in treating narcissism. And so, Lisa, would you like to introduce us to you and tell us what you would like us to know about grief as it relates to narcissism?
Yes. Yes. So I've been in private practice for like over 30 years, and I started off just specializing in trauma. And lo and behold, I realized that narcissism is caused from attachment trauma. And so narcissism just kept coming up constantly in almost every session in some way. And then I realized like I had come from narcissism. I myself was in my own psychotherapy working on my own narcissistic defenses. So it's just been this quite the journey. And I love helping people with it because it's way more common than people think, and it's so misunderstood from a lot what's on the internet. So my kind of mission is to uh, help people and know uh, it's very fixable. I learned in graduate school in 1986 how to fix it. So I don't know why it says on the internet that it's not curable, and people are confusing narcissists with sociopaths and psychopaths and all sorts of stuff. So that's kind of really my mission. And I've been thinking about the grief thing. And I think the hard where grief becomes complicated for narcissists is that, they struggle with feelings of vulnerability because they weren't able to be vulnerable when they were kids. So um, I think what's hard I was thinking one of my clients who she and her husband were both nurses, and he died. And um, there's so many things like left unsaid. I think when you're like married to a narcissist, or like say your dad's a narcissist, because uh, um, people a lot of times ask me, do narcissists really love people? And I'm like, yes, they truly love people. They're not really great at expressing it. They're just not. That's where they can suck. So my client said that here, her husband, they're both nurses at a hospital, and when she goes back to work after he dies, people are just like, yeah, he was the greatest, he was the greatest, he was the greatest, he was the greatest, and he loved you so much. And she would they would tell her all the things like he would say about her, but he didn't say them to her. So she'd want to burst into tears every time people were saying things, because they just assumed that she knew. They assumed that he was saying to her everything they were saying, but she would just be like, and then they told her they cleaned out his locker, and she used to put like a little positive note, like I love you or something positive, in his lunchbox every day. And all the years they were married, he never commented. He never like thanked her for the notes. And they were all in his locker, like every note. He had saved every one she had ever written him. And so her grief was, complicated with me. We got to process all the rage, all the anger, all the complicated grief, the complicated pain of like, you know, just having to like be lonely. People when they're, married to narcissists, or in, if your parents are narcissists, you feel lonely in the relationship because they can't express. And I think that that's what makes grief complicated. And I've been around a lot of people who were like dying and they struggle with narcissism. And they struggled with the fact that they were even dying, because they just the the vulnerability piece. So then there's the denial. So then you're trying to talk to them, you're trying to connect with them, and they're not even connecting. You can't have any intimate. So then you just, for me, I felt my father was an example. I just kept wanting to connect with him. Like, he had cancer. We knew he was dying. We should have known he was dying. He was told he was dying. And, but he just, we could, and so he died and we couldn't have a conversation. But he had written a 9-page letter for me that I read like after he died. And it was like, the most beautiful, like I was like, and then I was pissed at him because then I was like, you should have, why couldn't you have like shared this? Why couldn't we have, but he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. So it's like you end up, yeah, as you can tell, the adult child of a narcissist, you end up with trauma. And I think that's just like the hard piece with narcissism is there's a loneliness and there's certain things that are like unsaid, and I think it makes it complicated. So then I just have to help people with their like rage, or just the added anger, the added, and what they don't know. Their husband could have been like the pastor of the church, and everyone's like, oh, he was the most wonderful guy on the planet, and the wife's like, yeah, he was great out there. He struggled when he walked in the door. He struggled with connecting. He struggled with, and that's a grief that even when the person's still alive, the person has to deal with. And then when they die, a lot of times they don't want to tell everybody, like, well, here's the truth, so they're just holding the secret. So after you and I texted about this, I was like, wow, this is a great question. It's a great question because it is definitely complicated.
Yeah. I can remember after a long time of therapy about my narcissistic dad, I just suddenly saw this memory where I had every single time you did something shiny or amazing, where a typical parent would get that big blast of pride and say something awesome. My dad would say something snarky, like, stop it, stop making me feel like that. And so you learned the don't be shiny, don't be amazing, because that'll just cause bad things to happen. But later on in my therapy, I just flashed on this memory and I saw this happen and I realized, oh, he could not do joy. When he did love me, he was proud of me, but it burned. It was like it burned him. And he needed to say, stop it, you're killing me. But he was proud of me. He did see the amazing parts of me. He just could not tolerate how it felt to love somebody that much. So he just made it stop.
Right. And because joy got like shamed in him, it's like it's whatever was shamed in them is exactly what happens. And I know my husband was always telling me, like, he would have conversations with my dad, and he was like, oh, your dad was telling me like how proud he is of you. And I'm like, really? And then, you go to funerals and the person's like, oh, your dad just thought you were the greatest. He was so proud wrote your book on narcissism. He was just like all this stuff. And you're just like, that's great. I mean, he did try. At times, but yep, it's a thing. I think that's the
Yep. And what was interesting was around 40, I wrote my dad a letter and said, I'm done. I'm trying to be good, tired of trying to be good enough, trying to please you, trying to live up to your expectations. I'm done. And so when I would see him after that, it was like he had no idea how to be what I needed him to be,
right.
but he knew what would get him in trouble. So he would take a breath. It would be like,
Right.
and then,
Right.
no, don't say that. So, and I'm like, I'll take it. That's love.
Right.
If you can install a governor on that hatefulness, I'll take it.
Right.
So it showed me he did love me and he did hear me and he really wanted to get it right. He
Right.
just, there was porch light on, no one home.
He just didn't know how. He just didn't know. He just didn't. And that's the thing, is that a lot of times those feelings are in there. They're just buried very, very deep because their feelings got shamed. They, and so they learn to suppress them, suppress, suppress, suppress. So it's not like they don't have the feelings. They're just way buried, and they were taught to not express them. So then all of a sudden, like they get all anxious, and then their defense mechanisms come up, and they do, and narcissistic defense mechanisms are very unconscious. So like if the person gets anxious about something, then like defense mechanisms kick in and take over and shame the person in the way that they were shamed. Well, in reality, that's the last thing, if someone has like any understanding at all of their own childhood, they would be like, the last thing I'd want to do is shame somebody the way I was shamed. Um, but it's just an unconscious process that tends to go down through the generations. And that's why therapy is really good for people to stop and look at their childhoods.
Yeah. I was visiting my dad the last time I visited him before he died, just before his 80th birthday. And they had these nice neighbors. So this guy from across the street was over and they were talking, and my dad kind of snarked the guy. And there was this, so I wasn't paying really much attention, but there was this deadly silence. And I looked over, like, what just happened? And so they're like frozen in time. And then my dad says, "Do you like salmon? I just smoked some salmon. I'd really love to give you some salmon. Here, let me give you some salmon." And so he's ripping open the freezer. He's going to give this guy some salmon. And the guy was a therapist. And he said, "Dawn, you don't have to give me any salmon. You can just apologize for what you said."
Right? See,
And
and
then
that's
my dad's just frozen again,
nope.
like,
If he's like, no, that I don't know how to do. That's literally that's what I train in my You Might Be a Narcissist If book. I train people to like, okay, if you're married to a narcissist, and like, yeah, you can try to explain this stuff to them, and hopefully they'll kind of learn how to say they're sorry. But if not, they'll wash your car or they'll do the dishes for you, and that's them saying they're sorry. And that's as good as it gets. Like that's their but they literally, they just sometimes can't. It's like view it like a person that's in a wheelchair and you want them to like run, and they just can't. But that's their the salmon. That's a great example.
so you talked a little bit about people who the narcissist dies and then they hear all this good that they never received that was happening unbeknownst to them. So let's talk about when a spouse comes to you for therapy around being married to a narcissist. How do you help them grieve that easy TV family flow is probably not in the cards for them?
Right. That's literally what we do. It's like a long term. I've had several clients who like the if I can ever get their spouse to like come in too and work on it, then it's great, because then things really get better. But a lot of situations, my clients are like, oh no, he doesn't even know I'm in therapy, because like I can't even get that far. So I'm like, okay. So then I've just helped them, and it's just grieving, and they've just learned to have lots of like close girlfriends, lots of they get intimacy uh elsewhere, and then they just learn to take in those signs of love, of like literally like he washed my car. That's what. And like he's protective of in certain ways, or and but it's a thing. And I marvel at people. I mean, it just it one of my clients that I'm working with, she's turning 80, and she's been dealing with this for over 50 years. And that's so much what we talk about. But she just goes to a lot of celebrate recovery groups, and she's just not that she has any addiction issues. She just goes there to connect with people who are working on issues and that are authentic. And it's a great experience for her just to have people who are authentic. And because he's gonna die soon. He has got cancer and he's gonna die, and he can't connect with her. He's never asked her, how are you? It's been over 50 years. He cannot ask her. Like, he's really severe, like super severe, like the most aren't that bad, but he's really severe. But so we're just literally, grief is what we kind of do every session.
Wow. Okay, so now I'm a parent and I'm in therapy and I'm realizing I'm married to a narcissist and my kids are young and I've got to figure out how to communicate with my narcissist in a way that my kids have a chance to get some of their needs met. So how do you do that?
So a lot of times too, I just tell people, like, you do have to set certain limits with, like, the narcissist about, like, and this is where people, they have to be willing to, it's just say, like, the thing about narcissists is they unlike what it says online, narcissists hate the thought of hurting somebody. They Because they struggle with guilt and shame. So they the reason they get so defensive is because they shame out. So I just tell spouses, like, you have to say, like, no, this hurts. You can't say this to the kids. Like, you can't say this to the kids. This And then a lot of times that gives opportunity to say, like, what did it feel like to you when this was said to you? And but it gets dicey. But that's the thing with parenting is, I'm like, you have to be willing to, and then you have to, like, explain to your kids, like, your dad really loves you, but your dad's not good with emotions. Like, your dad's not he's not good with emotions. He didn't, this didn't. And kids, I have this couple I've worked with for years, and they raised the three most emotionally intelligent kids. And because their kids just understood that. They just understood, and they get it. Like, their dad does love them. And but the guy, luckily, he's one of my clients too. He was just able to, like, take a lot of cues from his wife, and, like, okay, I don't get this, but she does. So at least when we're parenting the kids, I just do what she does. And as long as, you're usually with narcissists, as long as you're, like, positive with them, and not, like, if they feel criticized, they don't do well. But if you kind of say, like, here, let's do this. And yet too, I've I'm so grateful that I've worked with people that were workable. Because, like, one of my clients came to me after she divorced a narcissist because he just wouldn't do that, and he was, like, destroying her son. And I said, oh, it's really good that you got a divorce. It's just really good, because she just kind of he was an alcoholic too, that wouldn't stop drinking, but he just was going to, like, destroy this kid. So she just had to take her son and divorce him, because he wasn't going to stop shaming him. He wasn't going to stop, like, once the kid turned, like, adolescence, so they got divorced. And now the kid turned out healthy, and now the kid can, like, visit the dad. And so sometimes, but you have to kind of really, that's where it really helps for, you really have to give the non-narcissist a lot of support.
So what's the progression then for someone? Okay, first we try this, then we try this, then we try this, then we leave.
Right. So the key is I always tell them, you want to tell, like, the narcissist, like, you're hurting me, like, this is hurting me, and um here's what I need, like, instead. And and then they have to just keep the um usually too, I'll tell them to, like, get my book, and they'll get my book. Um, and I go, put it on your coffee table. And the narcissist will be like, okay, I'll read this book, because I bet you're the narcissist. I'm not the narcissist. You're the narcissist. So they'll start reading about it. Well, because I talk about my own narcissism in it, they don't have shame. So then they're like, I'll go to therapy. but only with her because I admit it. Because so that's why I made this online video series to help narcissists, because I can't see everybody in the world. Like I just can't. But they're like, no, I only want to see her because again, people have no idea how much shame, and they won't even admit things to their spouse that they tell me. Like, they're like, oh my gosh, I was every single page. But to their spouse, they're like, okay, I'll give her a call. Like that's the thing, is that yeah, it's so much about shame. So I just tell them, like, people just have to sometimes just keep pushing the issue and pushing the issue. Like, no, healthy people apologize. Healthy people own their mistakes. Healthy people work on their mistakes. And we all make mistakes. And if you can't do that, then that's not a workable situation. That's just not. And I remember that's what my husband shared with me, was like, how is it that you don't ever make mistakes? And I was like, what do you mean? So I was like, everybody makes mistakes. And he's like, well, you don't ever like apologize. And I'm like, what do you, I don't? And he's like, no. He's like, you just like tell me that you didn't really do it, or that's not what you meant, or that's, you justify, like. And I'm like, wow. And I was in graduate school at the time, and it was our first year of marriage, and I was like, uh-oh, uh-oh. So I was already studying a lot about narcissism, and I'm like, this is not, because he was like, would you agree that like God's perfect and we're not? And I'm like, absolutely. Like, and so that's the thing with narcissists. If you just start having these questions where it's just like, how could it be that like I apologize to you, but you don't apologize to me? A lot of times, again, it's unconscious and the person doesn't realize it. And if you just keep wondering, my husband would just keep wondering, and I'd be like, oh no, like inside. And then you just, so I think that's really the key, is to, and now luckily there's just a lot of bad stuff online. So I almost dread having people look online, because there's so much misinformation. There's way more misinformation on narcissism than there is helpful information. So it's kind of scary.
It is true. And another thing I noticed both with the clients I work with and with my dad is if I stay in my grown-up space, it goes way better. So, when I responded every single time my dad did something snarky, it would be like, and he would feel ashamed because he would feel that. And
Yep.
then that it would get worse instead of better. But I noticed my husband didn't react to my dad at all. He would just go, well, Dawn, why would you say that to me? Oh, my dad, oh, we don't do that. So my husband stayed so stable. So in my own therapy, that was one of my goals. I'm just going to stay in my body. So the last time I went to visit him, I had done so much work and I felt so secure. And my stepmother and I came in from this craft fair where they were selling all the end of the line stuff. And I got him this trivet. He loved to barbecue. And I got him this thing. It was $12.99, 75% off. And it said the thrill of the grill. And the guy's in his chef hat, right? So I walk in, hey, Dad, I got you this at the craft fair. Immediately, whoop, $12.99. Who would pay $12.99 for this? I said, oh, not to worry. It was 75% off. Even someone as crabby as you is worth $4. And I just walked into the kitchen and ignored him. So in just a few minutes, he comes into the kitchen, yanks something off the wall, and says, Alice, did you see what Barbara got me at the craft fair? And she's kind of like, yeah, it's there. I was just in the living room. And he sets, chunks it up on the wall. Doesn't this look great? Thanks, Barb. And walks out of the room. I'm like, okay, that was so
See,
very strange.
see, that's the thing. That is the thing. But it's so hard. That's the one thing I'm telling you. I've told my clients, I was like, a lot of my clients have learned to do that, what you just did, better. I had the hardest time doing that around my dad, because it like hurts. It's like, ow, oh my, I'm a highly sensitive person. It's just like, oh, ow. But it is, the one time when he was dying and I was there, I'd flown there to help him, and he kept getting snarky every time I was trying to help him, until finally I just flipped out. It was just like an accidental, I think I just went into fight or flight, and I go, okay, well, you don't have to be such an asshole. And I didn't even mean, and then I was like, oh no. And he just, afterwards, he just started to laugh and he goes, okay, I really deserved that. And he said, I'm sorry. He goes, and I go, and I was still in that fight or flight. So I just said, I go, okay, I'm not going to offer you anything else. I go, if you need something, just let me know. Because that's partly when I did that asshole thing, you know? And after that, he goes, okay. And then he just smiled. And he's like, thank you. I appreciate that you flew into town. You're here to help me. And I'm not making it easy on you. Okay, I promise you. And then he's like, hey, would you mind going into the other room and getting me this? And I was like, sure, Dad. Thank you. So then we regrouped and we did it differently. And I was like, wow. Then I was like, I should have done that years ago. You know, like,
I know. The thing is, if you stay emotionally present and in fact bring strength, like,
right, right,
hey, dude,
right,
they're like, oh,
right.
if you shirk away, then the shame gets worse and it's all
Exactly.
bad. And
Exactly.
I thought, wow, 80 years it took you all this time to figure that out.
It's so true though. And my husband did the same thing with my dad all the time. And they had my dad when he was dying, like he said, like your husband's like the one person he trusted him so much because he's the one person that would just keep interacting with him. Everybody else would be like, wow, this is scary, gotta go. But like my husband would just keep interacting. He'd be like, oh, no, we're not gonna go to restaurants if we're gonna treat the waiters like that. He's like, I can't eat my food when you're like devaluing people and my dad was like, okay, I promise I will not. And he was like on his best behavior. He didn't my stepmom said he didn't get better when we weren't around, but in front of us he would be really nice to waiters and waitresses.
Because it's like they can work off of a to-do list. They're sort of like the Borg. They don't really ever get it, but they adapt. So they know, well, that gets me in trouble and that gets me in trouble. So they can work off of a to-do list, but you have to give it to them because if you're waiting for them to know it should be on that list, you're going to be waiting a long
Right,
time.
right, exactly. Unless they
So,
work on it. Yep, unless they work on their narcissism.
yep. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this. And at the end of my videos, I always ask people like, what is your 1 minute wisdom? If people ignored everything else we said and carried one thing off of this video, what would you want that one thing to be?
I would want it to be, I just think that grief is so misunderstood in our world and it is complicated and it takes people time. And I think I was talking to somebody recently who lost her husband a few years ago, and I said, I just think you're going to miss him until the day you die. You know, I just think this is not going to get better. And she's like, thank you, because I do miss him every day. She's like, yeah, I'm not a total wreck like I was, but I, I, I miss it. And I'm like, I just think that, and people they misunderstand grief. So I just think that, and people just, the one thing I'd want to say is like, don't say stupid things to people when they're grieving because I hate that. People are like, oh, they say some Pollyanna thing like, oh, he's in a better place or whatever. It's like, yeah, 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 okay, he's in heaven, but I'm not in heaven. Okay, but like, it's like,
In hell.
right, right. That's the thing. I think that's my thing would be is like, don't just be just say, I'm sorry. Just try to be with people, be with them where they're at, and don't say stupid things. I think that would be my thing.
Yes. And
You know?
then when it's a narcissist where you suddenly hear from other people all these things you long to hear yourself, that's another whole level of grief. And that never
Oh,
goes away either, that longing to have received the love that
right.
was available but couldn't be shown.
Yep. It was trapped deep inside. And yep. So it gets complicated.
It does. Okay, well, thank you so much. It's such an honor to hang out with you here. And I will put the information about your book, You Might Be a Narcissist If, and any other links that you want people to share where there's good information about narcissism online. That will be in the show notes. And thank you very much. I'm going to
Absolutely.
stop the recording now.